Well, hello, everybody. For those of you that are new, I'm Shane. This is my shop, my leather, my sewing machines, all that kind of stuff. If you were on the Maker Vloggery um, page on Facebook, I've done a video about the shop and all that kind of stuff. But what I want to talk about today is doing some detail work. One of the things that I do a lot of, which is detailed decorative work, which comes in the form of appliques and reverse appliques. So an applique is when you take an object or a cut item and stitch it onto something, put something on and then stitch it. Hey, Fiona. Whereas reverse applique is where you take your body and cut a piece out and stitch something behind it. So in this particular case, with what I'm working on right now, I'll strictly be working with appliques. And so I'm in the process of working on something like this. There are some more elements to add, but in this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm stitching all of the white elements. So if you look up close, what you can see is that this blue with the white is stitched to the black background, but right now only the white has been stitched. So in order to maintain the quality of the image that I'm trying to achieve, I'm using a white top stitch, as you can see here, but I'm also using a white bobbin. And the reason is that depending on how your thread tension is, you don't want the thread, your bobbin thread, being pulled through and showing up. So you want to make sure that your bobbin thread matches to maintain sort of the quality of the imagery. So I'm using white leather, I use white thread, I use white background. So anything that gets pulled through is going to be similar or keep the same look. Now the issue you have to be worried about is, it's not a huge concern, but if you look, let me see if I can get this to focus up close here real quick. There you go. So you see there's a piece of black on that E. What that is actually the flesh side. You can see it up here, this rough part being pulled back through the hole by the needle. And if I can find my tweezers here real quick, I'll show you that even on that E that I showed you just there, where was it? Right here, this E, where there's this black piece that's there, it's actually just a piece of leather that's pulled through. And so you have to be careful, or go through, depending on how you want that imagery to look, that you can go through with a pair of tweezers and remove those pieces. So you're back to looking original, or with the aesthetic that you're looking for. So what I do in this particular case, and again, if you were here when I did my video, or you saw my video of the shop, I have an industrial machine. I actually have two compound walking foot machines. One is an industrial, one is a portable, both of which I really like, but those are great for construction and not as efficient for the detail work. So I want to kind of zoom in on my sewing machine and what I'm doing with it in order to achieve particular results. So I'm going to move my camera here real quick. I wonder if I can do this. I don't know how easy this is to come off, but I'm going to try and see if I can get this to come off. I don't remember. Oh, that screws on, so hang on, just give me 1 second. There we go. So if I take my camera off and I show you the machine here, what you can see, get a close up here, is it's a standard machine, standard portable, tabletop machine. I'm actually using a Kenmore machine, and I am using a leather needle. This is just a Dritz leather needle. And then I'm also using, in this particular case, you can see it's white. Let me turn my light off here. I'm using a Teflon presser foot because it tends to let the leather run a little more smoothly than the metal ones do, okay? The other upgrade I've done to my machine is I'm using an LED bulb rather than a traditional incandescent bulb, all right? So you can see I've got my stitching here. I'm doing probably a 1/16 of an inch separation between the edge of the leather and the stitch line. And the reason I want to do that is I want to get as close as I can to the edge of the leather without risking the leather tearing out. And that way any stitch I put in is not going to stay in place, right? I've done this section. So what I'm going to do real quickly is move this. And unfortunately, because of the way my camera is set up right now, I'm not going to be able to leave that just sitting there. So if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and move this. I keep my thread connected. You don't have to, but it's just easy. And then what I'm going to do is set it down where I need it to be, working on the next section. So if I take a little step back here and you look, I've got my, obviously all of my threads that I use to color match, all of the different colors of leather that I use. Unfortunately, from this angle, you can't see anything but blue and gray, but there's a bunch of colors in there. And what I do is, on this particular machine, when you wind the bobbin up here, you have this option, of course, of setting it up to have the bobbin stop when you're winding it. But on this particular machine, there is a function where the motor can be engaged, where you press the pedal and the motor runs, or disengage when you pull it out. But what's nice about this machine is that even when the motor is disengaged like this, it means the needle will still operate. But it operates without having to pull the tension of the motor with it, so it turns much more easily. The reason I do this, or the reason I like this, is because running a stitch with a machine, especially with a tabletop machine like this that doesn't have a servo motor, means you don't have as much control. You are relying on the clutch motor to provide enough torque to get through what you see here as 1, 2, 3 layers of leather without building enough speed that it takes off and kind of ruins the clean stitch line that you're trying to create. So what I do is I hand turn all of those decorative elements to keep the decorative portion of it that I want to maintain. So if you just give me a second, I'm just going to get my camera reconnected to my tripod here. There we go. I'll see if I can move my camera in a little bit, and you can see what it is that I'm doing. Actually, I'll move my camera to the side just a little bit. So there you go. So then you can see, and drop this down. There you go. So you can see, and I'm going to leave my light off because I don't get as much blowout with the white, but you can see what I'm doing is, again, at roughly a 1/16 of an inch from the edge of my leather, I am turning, using the machine handle, all of these stitches. In some particular cases where I have a long enough straight or an arc like this, I might use the pedal, but traditionally not. I'm more concerned with getting this right than I am with speed. Making sure these things look the way I want them to look is the priority goal for me. And so what I'm doing is hand turning all of these stitches. And hand turning on a machine like this is a really handy thing to know about, because you can stitch leather that is significantly thicker than what the machine would let you do, and lets you get nice clean stitches. Again, depending on the thickness of the leather that you're dealing with, you're going to want to mess around with your thread tensions to make sure everything is set the way you want. You're also, depending on your needle, not going to be able to run the same kinds of threads. But in this particular case, using a traditional all-purpose thread serves a couple of purposes. One, the options available in terms of color matching are really high. And two, because these aren't like seams like you would have in clothes where they're getting pulled apart, the durability of the thread becomes less important. So it's not like the seam on a pair of jeans that's getting a lot of tension put on it, or on a jacket, or the bottom of a bag, for example, where you have a lot of weight pulling on this. And so you don't have to worry about running like a 69 weight polyester or a nylon, which is what I run in my industrial when I'm doing construction on things like my vests and other garments and things like that. So you don't have to run a super heavy duty thread. Now, in this particular case, the thread I run on my bobbin is different than my top stitch thread. I run a Coats and Clark's heavy duty polyester thread, which is a little bit thicker than their all-purpose thread. And the reason I do that is because the bobbin case has a tension adjustment on it. I find that using a thicker thread actually gives me a bit of a better control over the thread tension on the bobbin. Hold on. And the other thing that this does is that if you are diligent in allowing the feed dogs to work and helping it along, unlike hand stitching, you'll see you get a nice, not unlike, that's unfair to say, but you can fairly quickly and easily, without having to mark all of this out first, get a really consistent stitch without having to hand stitch it. So I have just found this to be, as slow as it seems, a very efficient way of doing things. And I would recommend for anybody who's a maker, even using a lighter weight veg tan to be able to try this, because you should be able to go ahead and use this same technique for much thicker leather. Now, this particular leather that I'm doing is probably, the black is a 2 to a 2.5 ounce chrome tan, whereas the white and the blue that I'm going through here are a probably 1 3/4 inch chrome tan, or not inch, ounce chrome tan. So those are the thicknesses that I'm going through, and going through relatively easily. Again, leather needles are relatively inexpensive, so it totally makes sense to go out and get a few, and then you can change your needle as you feel that they're getting dull or it's becoming more difficult. But these machines, in terms of hand turning them, are capable of going through a fairly substantial amount of leather. I've gone through probably 6 or 8 layers of this same 2 ounce chrome tan, so it's worth looking at. So all of my graphics that I'm doing here were done using my Cricut to create cardstock templates, and then they were transferred using a Sharpie in reverse to the backside of the leather, and then cut by hand using scissors. So because of the custom nature of this work, I couldn't, for example, use a clicker to mark out all the letters, because the fonts on everything I do are different. The physical sizes of the fonts are different. So it would just be too many dies to have made for it to even remotely seem like a reasonable idea. But you can see, as I'm going around, you can see my stitch line forming here in terms of getting the kind of distance from the edge that I want, and having it consistent around all of these particular curves and angles, and having it look right, which I would not be able to do if I was going ahead and using the pedal and the motor, because I would not be able to control the speed because of the clutch motor as well as I would like. So that is what I'm doing with this. And in fact, my other tabletop or portable compound walking foot machine has a clutch motor on it as well. I was hoping to convert it to a servo motor, but there are no portable servo motors that I was able to find to convert it. So I'm probably going to look at getting the Sailrite Monster Wheel, which is equivalent to what Parker was talking about, which is a gear changing option, which gives you better control. So that's one of the things that I will be looking at upgrading on that machine at a future time. So in the meantime, that's about it. Thanks for tuning in. I just wanted to do an update on what it is that I do, and let some of the other makers see what I do. So thanks for tuning in, and good luck with all of your leather work. Thanks. Bye.